You're listening to a Roddenberry podcast.
Don't touch that dial. We'll be right back. And now for a brand new show we hope you'll like. Gene-ology, a Roddenberry podcast.
Episode 61, Affair at the Trading Post. Welcome to Mission Log Gene-ology. I'm Ashley Thomas.
And I'm Earl Green.
Each week on Gene-ology, we trawl the Roddenberry archives, examining the shows and scripts written by Gene Roddenberry, looking for signs of the morals, meanings, and messages most commonly associated with his most famous later work, Star Trek.
This week, we continue winding our way through Wrangler, the first series Gene created to get past the pilot, and wondering if Pitcairn isn't better off when the cards are down. Because sometimes winning comes with terms and conditions, and a whole extra person.
Now, before we get to trivia on this week's episode, let me take a brief moment to encourage you to join our Patreon, or follow us on YouTube, or leave a review wherever you're listening to us. Patreon is your gateway to all things Mission Log, including exclusive access to the unedited version of our show and our private Discord where you can interact with us, me and Earl, your hosts, during scheduled live calls along with occasional screenings. Especially with the stuff that we cover, it's sometimes kind of hard to find, so that's really important. You can access all of this for just $1 a month. So head over to patreon.com/missionlog to see what tiers work for you, and you can join in the conversation. And now, this week's trivia. Earl, have you wrangled some trivia for us?
Well, I did some trading and came up with this trivia. I did some horse trading.
You did some horse trading. Did you have to beat a man in cards?
I hope not, because that is something I very seldom tend to do.
I have been told I have no poker face, so I perhaps should not play cards or sing that Lady Gaga song.
The Affair at the Trading Post is the third episode of Wrangler, airing on August 18th, 1960. Luckily for us, IMDb does appear to have a fairly complete list of credits for this one. Now, we are venturing into new territory with this script from Wrangler. This is the first script we've covered in Gene-ology on which Gene Roddenberry had no writing credit whatsoever. Now, it's very likely that he took an active hand in guiding and editing the script and performing any necessary rewrites, but in covering this script from the archive, what we are trying to determine are the answers to the following questions. Does the script make it seem as though Gene was picking writers who shared his values and worldview? And was Wrangler, as a series, constructed in such a way that it felt like a Gene Roddenberry show, even if Gene did not write the script for a given week? So, get ready, and know that this is kind of a test run for how we will be covering The Lieutenant when we reach that series. And maybe some shows that come after The Lieutenant. This script was written by George F. Slavin. Like Gene, George was a decorated World War II veteran. He got his start writing for radio dramas and very quickly turned his hand to writing screenplays for films and, in the 1950s, television. George frequently wrote westerns and military dramas, turning in scripts for West Point, The Untouchables, Bat Masterson, Cheyenne, Laramie, Bonanza, the usual suspects. But George would cross paths with Gene again, co-writing The Mark of Gideon in Star Trek's third and final season on the air. George's co-writer, incidentally, was actor and writer Stanley Adams, who had played Cyrano Jones in The Trouble with Tribbles. George Slavin would go on to write for Mission Impossible, Happy Days, Charlie's Angels, and Hawaii Five-0, among many others. We lost George in 2001. Our guest stars this week include Suzanne Lloyd as Monacita. I would say that Wrangler was very early in Suzanne's career, except that she had already played a great many TV guest roles before this, appearing in Have Gun Will Travel, Rawhide, The Twilight Zone, and 77 Sunset Strip prior to her appearance in Wrangler. She, too, was a mainstay during the TV Western's heyday and went on to appear in many more TV roles through the early 70s, including British productions such as The Avengers and The Saint. After that, Her IMDb shows her taking a lengthy break before returning to acting as recently as 2017. Ted DeCorsia plays Tall Hat here. With an almost equal number of TV and film credits, Ted DeCorsia was frequently cast as heavies and bad guys. TV guest roles included Have Gun, Zorro, Peter Gunn, Kane's 100, The Outer Limits, The Man from U.N.C.L.E., and Get Smart. Ted DeCorsia left us in 1973. John Jock Gaynor guest stars as Uray, a former minor league baseball player who broke into showbiz as a set designer. John Gaynor tried on acting for a while before moving into writing and producing. His acting credits include TV roles on Hawaiian Eye, Batman, The Invaders, Coronet Blue, Mission Impossible, and Knight Rider. He was a producer on the first season of Buck Rogers in the 25th Century. We lost Jock Gaynor in 1998.
Now, look, little lady, I know you don't understand a word I'm saying, and you've got a right to hate every man you've ever met. But I didn't ask for you. I don't need your troubles. I got all I can handle myself. No use talking to her, is there, Sam?
I understand. You and me, I belong to you. The rest, just the same. Only the words different.
Hey, you talk pretty good. I'm glad you opened up. I could have gone on gabbing all night. Maybe make a darn fool of myself. Tall Hat said your people come from the Lower Mesa? They'd be, Chiricahua Apache, wouldn't they?
I will never see them again.
Now, all I want to do is get to my job in Tucson, and maybe, if I have a little time left over, spend it in the only library in this miserable area. Now, least you can do is give me the benefit of the doubt. Well, if you're not going to eat that, you might as well hand it over. Much better. If you want to stay mad, it'll be harder to do on a full stomach.
Pitcairn is an American cowboy who rides the western frontier, helping people in need. With a carbine in his saddle boot, Pitcairn and his horse Sam look for work and adventure in the Wild West. Prologue. Wrangler's Log, June 8, 1869. Pitcairn arrives at the Gila River in Arizona, bound for Tucson, and badly in need of supplies. You know what else Pitcairn is badly in need of? Money. That brings him to a Native American encampment where he's been told he'll find a trader named Tall Hat. But he's also been told that Tall Hat is quite a character. When Pitcairn finds him, Tall Hat isn't trading, he's winning at cards. Though Pitcairn tries to interest Tall Hat in a leather-bound book he's carrying, Tall Hat is far more interested in Pitcairn's gun. Pitcairn decides to make a game of it. He'll wager his gun against 2 weeks of supplies. Harry up! As Tall Hat's tribesmen watch, Pitcairn begins cleaning up, eventually winning more than just 2 weeks of supplies. But Tall Hat insists on staying in the game, until another member of his tribe quietly beckons from the door of the trading post. Tall Hat is told that the Reckless One is on his way, Uray the Apache. This seems to be a cause for great concern, maybe because Uray has pledged to kill Tall Hat. Where are people's manners these days? Anyway, back to the game. Tall Hat says he'll cut the cards one more time for the most valuable thing other than the trading post itself. Pitcairn draws a queen. Tall Hat glances at his card. Unseen by Pitcairn, Tall Hat has drawn a king, and yet he sighs in resignation and tells Pitcairn, "You win," and summons someone from the back room of the trading post, a lovely young Native American woman, Monacita. Tall Hat indicates Pitcairn and casually tells Monacita she belongs to this guy now. Monacita doesn't seem thrilled with this, and come to think of it, Pitcairn isn't exactly behind this plan either. Tall Hat says she'll be Pitcairn's slave girl now and steps outside before either of them can protest. Act 1. Pitcairn packs into Sam's saddlebags and onto Sam's saddle as much of his supplies and winnings as he can carry. He'll be back for the rest later. Tall Hat tries to hand him a whip, in case Monacita tries to run away. Pitcairn refuses it. She can run away any time she likes. Pitcairn plans to return her to her own tribe en route to Tucson. Tall Hat congratulates Pitcairn on being such an enlightened white man, but here, take the whip anyway. Pitcairn invites the hesitant Monacita to climb onto the back of the saddle, and off they ride. As soon as Pitcairn is out of earshot, Tall Hat talks strategy with his tribesmen. He had his reasons for letting Pitcairn win, one of which is that he believes Ouray, the reckless one, will kill him on sight. And there's another reason as well, though he doesn't say what. Before long, another rider approaches on the back of another horse. The reckless one is here. He's here to see Tall Hat. It's not a social visit. As the older man brandishes and then sets aside a rifle, Ouray pulls a tomahawk from his belt. He has come for Monacita. Tall Hat spins a tale to save his own skin. A white man named Pitcairn just took her by force. He thinks they were headed for Tucson. Ouray vows to return if he discovers Tall Hat is lying to him. Act 2. That night, Pitcairn and Monacita sit by the fire. He offers her some rabbit stew, which she refuses, just as she refused to drink from his canteen earlier. He grabs the whip and then throws it away, trying to win her trust. Unsure of whether or not she speaks a word of English, Pitcairn assures her that he has no intention of keeping her or harming her. She says nothing. Pitcairn might as well carry on a conversation with Sam, which he starts to do, and then Monacita says, "I understand." It turns out she speaks English quite well enough to make it clear she doesn't trust Pitcairn any more than she does any other man. But Pitcairn doubles down. He's got a job waiting for him in Tucson, and he hopes to spend his spare time there in the library. She finally chows down on some of Pitcairn's homemade rabbit stew, and he grabs a bedroll for her. But she rolls away and grabs Pitcairn's gun, certain that he's about to try something less wholesome than his trail cooking. Except that Pitcairn was going to set up his own bedroll over by Sam, and also he's got the ammo in his pocket so the gun isn't loaded. Having figured out that she was born Apache, Pitcairn advises Monacita against running away in the night. If she encounters Sioux or Navajo nearby, she could end up in a far worse situation than she was at the trading post. She very cautiously beds down for the night. As Pitcairn and Monacita sleep, Ouray approaches their campsite. He draws his tomahawk and prepares to throw it at Pitcairn's head, but disturbs Sam, who stirs and makes a noise, waking Pitcairn, who not only rolls out of the way but comes up shooting. Needless to say, Monacita wakes up too, but Pitcairn completely misjudges the situation. He thinks Tall Hat has come to retrieve her. But, hey, change of subject. Hey, Monacita, do you ever wash up? Face, hair, that sort of thing? Monacita replies, "For what? For men who treat women like animals?" And Pitcairn concedes she has a very good point. Morning. Pitcairn awakens and finds that Monacita isn't by the fire. Neither is her blanket. A short walk away, Pitcairn finds her by a stream. She's washed up, turned her blanket into a garment, and is now trying to wash her own dirty clothes. She says no man has seen her like this since she was taken captive. Pitcairn advises that they probably need to keep moving. After all, they already had one uninvited guest overnight. He then surprises her by handing her his loaded gun. She seemed to know how to handle it last night, apart from that minor detail of whether or not it was loaded. Pitcairn is going to load everything up and get Sam ready. She can protect herself with the gun while he does that. Once they're back on the trail, Pitcairn knows he's being followed by someone who rides when he rides, stops when he stops, and carefully stays out of rifle range. Monacita says that her father's camp is just over the next ridge, but it's not. There's a cabin there now. Pitcairn thinks an investigation is in order. The cabin is occupied by two brothers, Wes and Shep Martin. They claim they saw Monacita's tribe heading north, possibly even headed all the way to Canada. The brothers Martin have a proposal to solve all of Pitcairn's problems. Just leave the woman here. She'll have free room and board, but she'll have to do some chores around the house. Pitcairn doesn't see that as a solution. They try to offer to buy her from him, but Pitcairn says she's not for sale. Then they try to take her by force, but Pitcairn has anticipated that move. Wes goes for a gun, but Pitcairn grabs a knife and holds it to Shep's chest. Wes can drop the gun or start planning his brother's burial. Pitcairn tells Monacita to go saddle up on Sam, and then using Shep as a human shield all the way to the door of the cabin, escapes the brothers Martin. Okay, slight change of plans. Pitcairn says he'll take Monacita to the Indian agent in Tucson in the hopes that she can be reunited with her tribe. She's more worried about what happens to her if they can't be found. There was one man in her tribe who looked upon her with favor. What does her future look like if she's not reunited with him? Not too far away, Pitcairn again spots the rider who's been following them and urges Sam to keep moving. Act 3. Pitcairn and Monacita have reached the Longwood Hotel, a halfway point to Tucson, where Pitcairn tries to rent 2 rooms for the night. Only the innkeeper isn't willing to rent one to Monacita. Pitcairn is adamant about getting 2 rooms, and everyone having drinks stands up, kind of aggressively. They've been having problems with the local tribes and make it clear her type is not welcome here. Pitcairn prepares to make a fight of it, but since he was just trying to get rooms for the night, he didn't think he would need to be armed. He grabs a knife. One of the men draws a gun. Not looking so great for Pitcairn. Then 2 other men burst into the hotel, dragging Ouray with them. They caught him at the edges of town. They think he's the one who's been causing trouble. The men turn their attention from Pitcairn. They are in a mood for a hanging. Maybe more than one. Pitcairn will get his turn. But when Monacita calls Ouray by name, the truth starts coming out. This is the man who looked upon her in favor, and she looks on him with favor as well. Ouray repeats the story he was told about Pitcairn taking Monacita from Tall Hat by force, only for Monacita to tell him that story is a lie. Pitcairn tells the whole room, "Hey, you heard it here first. We all did." All Ouray wants is his future bride, and he'll leave town. The crowd backs off, allowing Ouray and Monacita to leave unharmed. Pitcairn gets to stay unharmed, and he can get 1 room for the night. Also, he'll need a bowl of sugar from the innkeeper. Pitcairn has a horse to thank for saving his butt. The end.
All right, Earl, I believe we can put our cards down on the table and say, full house, well done on that recap, my friend.
Yeah, that's pretty sneaky, sis, the whole thing about, oh, well, sorry, I didn't have the winning card. I lose. It's like, it's very specified in the script that he draws better than a queen. It's like, okay, what is up with that?
Right.
We have the opening monologue in every episode with a date. And I'm trying to figure out what to call this, because Kirk had star dates. Like, should Pitcairn have, I don't know, what is it, Sam dates? What is this? What do we call it?
I think just the date.
Speaking of cards, did you get the impression from this that we are dealing with Pilot Pitcairn again? Because he is awesome at everything, including cards, apparently.
I am fully anticipating that in the next script we read that we find out that Pitcairn's middle name is Gary Stew. Kind of impressive just how good he is at everything when the story suits it.
Yeah. And hey, lucky him, he has found the earliest precursor of a casino on tribal land.
Hey, you know what? I hadn't thought about that, but you are right.
Pitcairn tells Monacita, "I know you don't understand a word I'm saying, and you've got a right to hate every man you've ever met." This does not feel like a line from 1960. This feels like a line from the future, because you're damn right she has a right to hate every man she's ever met.
She absolutely
Whether it
does.
was for enslaving her or for handing her off like a secondhand pair of socks.
There's so much about this where I'm like, wow, this is really progressive. And other parts of this I'm like, dang.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, like so much of it I'm so impressed with. I'm like, wow, you want to give the woman agency. There's he very explicitly says, we don't own people. I'm taking her back to her people where she belongs, like wherever you took her from. So, and then like the whole line is like, you have every right to hate every man you've ever met. And I'm like, yeah, because I can imagine if this woman is your slave, quote unquote, she's been doing more than cleaning your dishes.
Yeah, and there's kind of whenever we run into the brothers in their cabin later, that entire exchange is written in such a way that they're not specifying what house chores they want her for.
Mm-hmm.
It's probably not doing the dishes, and if there's anything that's really interesting about this script, it's the stuff that peeks out from between the lines without being spoken aloud in the lines.
For sure.
I totally feel the same whiplash that you were getting. We'll get to whiplash later.
Yeah.
But the zigzagging back and forth between, okay, this line is really progressive and emancipated and enlightened, and then whoop, we're back over here and Pitcairn's a pig. When Monacita tries to pull Pitcairn's gun on him and he reveals he's got the ammo in his pocket, all the good will that he had from that line about, you've got a right to hate every man you've ever met, he pisses that away with this line. Just like a woman got to find out for herself.
You know what?
Yeah, we are back to the Pitcairn of the Bar M.
As a woman who does like to find out things for herself, but it's because I just want to know. It's not because I think you don't know what you're talking about. I gotta see it with my own eyes, but I don't think my gender has anything to do with that.
Yeah, and I don't think that is the spirit in which that line is written.
Absolutely not. It's written as, oh, a woman, how dare she question a man.
Yeah. And, okay, let's do the zigzag again. When Pitcairn asks Monacita, do you ever clean yourself up? I love this line. For what? For men who treat women like animals?
Get it?
Yes. Every other exchange between Pitcairn and Monacita is like borderline postmodern feminist gold.
Yeah.
And then every other exchange, Pitcairn's a jackass. Again, with watching a woman bathing, and I do declare, this one is a ride. I mean, sir, yeah, we haven't gotten to whiplash yet. The whiplash is already here.
Yeah, truly.
Best character in the whole script, again, is Sam the horse.
Of course.
Yeah, Sam is also an alarm system. Sam is the best horse.
He's so good.
He deserves at least one bowl of sugar. I mean...
minimum.
Yeah. Whereas his person brought a knife to a gunfight. Pitcairn, that's not the Chicago way. Okay, I have a question for you.
All right, I'm ready.
Okay, we are in script 2 in a row of people lining up to watch Pitcairn hang from a tree. He is being awfully trusting of everyone around him, saying, oh, we will let them leave unharmed. I don't know. I think I would be trying to assert a little bit of control over that. Yes, you will leave them unharmed, and I'm going to watch with my own eyes them leaving town, so I know.
Yeah. I will make certain that you leave them unharmed. Please and thank you.
Exactly. Now, given that he's just brought a knife to a gunfight, he really doesn't have any... he would not have any muscle to back that up with. I get it, but I would be trying to enforce some accountability there. Because, again, second time in a row, we just got away from Cunningham in A Time for Hanging. Well, he was hungry for a hanging, and these guys are too. Yeah, Pitcairn, he picked the worst places to go to work or to pass through on your way to a job.
He really did. He really did. I guess, like Paladin, he's attracting trouble.
One thing I do appreciate, though, is that Paladin is armed to the teeth. You take his peacemaker away from him, he's still got that Derringer in his belt.
Mm-hmm.
Paladin can still kill you, even if you don't think he can. We seem to be making a point here of specifying that Pitcairn is not armed at all times.
I mean, his preferred weapon is the carbine. Can't really put that in your back pocket.
Yeah, it's hard to conceal. I get that.
Mm-hmm.
He does not have it with him when he talks to Wes and Shep. Winds up bringing a knife to that gunfight too, except in that case he has a hostage.
Mm.
He has a lot more leverage there than he does at the hotel, where he's basically facing an angry mob.
Right. Anytime we have been handed a script or a show with indigenous folks, unfortunately, I don't know that we've encountered one where the indigenous folks are played by actual indigenous folks. And based on what I saw on IMDb, I don't think that's... I think that's still the case here. We've got a whole bunch of white people in brown face.
You know, it occurs to me occasionally that if I try to show maximum grace to the casting choices indicated in the IMDb listing, yeah, they do all sound very European.
Mm-hmm.
But there's marriage, there's changes of names,
sure,
stuff like that. I don't know that none of these people have any Native American blood coursing through their veins. It just seems really unlikely, though.
That's fair. Believe it or not, folks, I technically have enough Cherokee to legally claim it. The only thing I have to show for that is I have brown eyes. Everything else about my DNA is colonized. So very pale, very blonde. So perhaps, just looking at somebody's IMDb, I can't make that judgment call. I did try to read up to see if, because a lot of times IMDb will list, this person is of whatever heritage. So sometimes I'm able to find that information. But I couldn't find that information just taking a quick stroll through the IMDb. I didn't look further than that. So I'm happy to be corrected if I'm wrong.
I looked through several of the cast bios. Some were interesting enough to make it into trivia. Others were just... well, they've been in this, and this. Do we really want to take up time saying that?
Sure.
I did not make note of anyone having a Native American heritage note like that in their trivia. No, you're probably right. This is another case of caking makeup on people and, oh, hey, look, they're Native Americans.
Mm-hmm.
It's icky, and yet here's the tightrope walk. We're kind of in the same space with Paladin and Sam Houston here, advocating for the sovereignty and dignity of Native Americans. How much of the miscasting do you forgive for the message?
Right. I mean, Gene's the producer on here, so I don't know Jack Diddley about how casting works. But I would imagine, would he not have some say? Surely there were Native actors working at that time. Although they're not getting as much to do as people who aren't Native or any other particular ethnicity. So, I don't know.
I forget which actor I read an interview with of Middle Eastern extraction,
mm-hmm.
who was trying to find avenues for his creativity other than acting, because as long as he was acting, he was going to be cast as terrorist number 3 forever. And that just made me wince when I read it. I'm trying to remember who that was who said that.
I heard something very similar on Katie Sackhoff's podcast recently, and I can't remember who she was interviewing. But yes, I know what you're saying.
And so even if you are an actor of solid Native American extraction in proximity to Hollywood at this period of time, you want to set yourself up for this? You know, you're going to be, you know, in a script where we're calling somebody Squaw Man because there is a Native American woman accompanying him. How much of that do you want to be in? How much of that do you want to be party to? I could see where the desire to reclaim some of your dignity maybe overrides career ambitions. And roles with dignity for Native Americans were few and far between at this point.
Right.
Remember Boots and Saddles, white guys with dad bods being painted up, and they were just this faceless threat with no nuance, no backstory, no motivation, no justification. It's just, oh, they're Injuns. They're here to hunt us down. If I were a performer of Native American extraction, I would take one look at that and say, thank you, but no, I will do something else.
That's fair. That's fair.
Ashley, I don't know about you, and I think we started in on this in our observations. I felt like this script was all over the road, and I don't know if we are seeing Gene's rewrites replacing part of what was originally there, and so we're getting two different voices because we might be dealing with two different writers. But this one is a ride. There's some really admirable stuff here. I love that Monacita kept getting her verbal punches in with regards to her thoughts on men. I loved Pitcairn asserting to the Martin brothers that Monacita is no one's property. I loved that he was willing to fight for her having as much right to be in the hotel as anyone else there. In those moments, Pitcairn seems like he belongs in kind of that pantheon of Gene Roddenberry heroes with James T. Kirk and Picard and, you know, with Paladin a la Roddenberry. It's not everyone wrote Paladin the same way, but because we kept watching Gene's episodes of Have Gun in order, we got a very particular flavor of Paladin that would probably only really stand out like it did if you were watching Have Gun the way that we were. Pitcairn seems liberal in his outlook on the rights of those around him. He is willing to take a stand even if he knows that's not going to be making a popular statement. And he's not here to start a gunfight. You know, Paladin is a professional gunslinger. Supposedly Sundance is too, although he's also one who passes out drunk after bringing his horse into the hotel lobby. Maybe the less we say about Sundance, the better. Keep Sundance out of this conversation. Pitcairn is either unarmed or is disarmed at moments when Paladin would be drawing down on people. So, again, going back to other heroes written by Gene Roddenberry, Pitcairn is not going to kill today. That's good. That's good. And then these little gems of lines alternate their very ahead of their time sentiments with weird backward statements that are hard to reconcile with Pitcairn being a more enlightened man than those around him. I suppose any one of us could be a mixture of both. Pitcairn points out part of the reason he is taking the Tucson gig is there's a library there. So he is still learning, and maybe I just need to show him some grace there. It's difficult when at some points in this script he is so close to being proto-Kirk. And then, you know, I suppose Kirk has a few moments where he seems a little less than enlightened. Help me out here. I'm so confused about, never mind the enemy within. We're getting two Pitcairns in this script.
Truly. It is indeed a tale of two Pitcairns. And it took me a second because so much of this sounds like Gene. I was like, oh, wait a minute. No. This is not a Gene script. This is Glenn Slavin. And so, and I, other than the one Star Trek episode, I don't know that I've seen any of his other work. So I don't know how true to form this is, or if he even had the opportunity to tell stories like this, where you're like affirming the agency of people who are neither male or white. So I really liked that aspect of the story, and I found it interesting, like, where Pitcairn's all like, well, after I do my job in Tucson, I'm going to go to the only library in this godforsaken area. I'm like, dang, okay. That's a very Paladin thing to do. Yeah. It's a very, Kirk thing to do. So I thought that was really interesting. But then you have lines like, oh, just like a woman had to find it out for herself.
I do declare, Ashley.
I do declare I want to punch you in the face. And then, with her, washing the clothes or whatever, and that's like, oh, she had washed her face and tidied her hair and cleaned up a little bit. After he asked her, do you ever freshen up, clean up, or whatever? And she's like, what, for men who would use me and abuse me, as basically what she comes down on?
That's the unspoken underpinning of that line, is that being less than attractive is a defense mechanism.
Yes.
And the fact that she has a strong reaction to Pitcairn saying, okay, we're going to bed down for the night, she is clearly worried that means something else.
Right.
Than what he is saying. And the reason she is feeling that is probably because it has meant something else so many times in her experience. Mm-hmm. None of them pleasant.
Which is horrible.
Yeah, there's a lot picking out between the lines that I feel like they couldn't get into the lines. They couldn't say it out loud, but it's there.
100%. I have to wonder how that was received by the viewing audience at the time. Like, are people paying enough attention to read between the lines?
Were people sticking around after that LA Times review of the first episode? That's kind of what I'm wondering.
Fair, yeah.
There's so much going on here now. I think back to Gene's relationship with Sam Rolfe and Gene's relationship with Richard Boone. And the reason they had him back so many times to write for Have Gun Will Travel is because they were like, we like this guy, he shares our values. So in the case of George Slavin, I wonder if this is someone whose work Gene knew and said, oh yeah, you're coming over to play in my sandbox this time. I want people who have similar values to my own, a similar worldview.
Right.
We have no production paperwork to back that up, unfortunately. But when you are the creator of the show and you are the producer of the show, this seems like the sort of thing that you do put a thumb on the scales. You actually very deliberately, intentionally pick your writers so that their turn at the typewriter will turn out not too terribly differently from your own.
I want to come back to that line, Earl, when she's asked, do you ever wash your face, comb your hair, or anything like that? So I had my initial reaction was, this is about her making herself, more quote unquote pretty or presentable because man is present.
Yeah. I found very few readings of that line that didn't turn out icky in my head.
As someone who does not enjoy necessarily doing the traditional girl things, like I very rarely wear makeup, I will wear a dress on occasion if it is required of me. I don't hate it, but also I'm like, that thing better have pockets or I'm going to be big mad. But I don't want to do it because it is required of me because I'm a woman. I want to do it because I want to. And most of the time, I just can't be bothered.
I get that. As a big fan of sweatpants. Coming at this from the male angle, no, I totally get you. This is why we are friends.
Yes, I am also very pro sweatpants and soft pants in general. So that was my knee-jerk reaction. I was like, you better never ask me, like, Ashley, do you ever dress up? Or I'm gonna be aggravated, for want of better terminology.
Well, I found myself wondering, what the hell business is it of his?
Yeah, like, why do you care, bro? Like, because I was fully expecting her to be like, oh, Pitcairn, you're looking so Mickey Outy tonight. And
I am glad that did not happen here.
Yeah, I mean, like, it felt like maybe towards the end she was maybe getting a little soft on Pitcairn, but I think she was mostly just like, oh, this is a good man, not a guy who's taking advantage of me.
Yeah, she seems to take a very different tack with him after the whole thing with the two really icky brothers.
Yes.
I am not hooked on the brothers in that cabin.
No,
oh my gosh.
Absolutely not.
Creeps.
No. No, thank you. So I wanted to share my knee-jerk reaction as a woman who hears that kind of thing occasionally. Like, not so much anymore, but especially when I was growing up, like, have you ever thought about doing this? I was like, yeah, that sounds horrible to me. I would not do that. I would like to sleep 20 more minutes in the morning rather than put on makeup. Thank you.
Guys get it too. Don't you ever wear a tie? Don't you feel like wearing the success uniform? Yeah, let me tell you what you can do with your success uniform.
But I thought it was interesting because that was my knee-jerk reaction. Like, don't tell her how she needs to be, you man. But also then like, oh, her saying, why should I? Because all these guys are going to be awful to me. So, no, thank you. I'm like, get it.
Yeah, I applauded that line and just kind of winced at the same time because it's like, this is a line that comes from terrible experiences that she has lived, and that I'm not even sure I want to think about any further.
This is an interesting one, Earl. It definitely has Gene's fingerprints on it, even though he didn't write it. And I think you're right. I have to wonder how much encouragement did Mr. Slavin get in the writer's room.
Yeah, I feel like he was probably picked very deliberately, but I do also detect Gene coming in maybe with a little bit of a polish here. I don't know how much. Because I don't want to steal credit from George Slavin.
Absolutely not. No.
Because this is a really interesting story. I like how it's told. It just drives me crazy that we've kind of split Pitcairn in two in the transporter, and yet he's in the same body.
What's the cowboy equivalent of Tuvixed?
Yeah, he's the Tuvix of the 1860s. Which, the splitting in two with the transporter, that's only funny because the transporter chief in the cage is Chief Pitcairn.
I love that. Way to reuse a name, Gene.
Yeah, please tell me Sam's somewhere on the Enterprise. Well, Ashley, I think there are messages in this episode.
There are certainly messages, and I think there might even be morals and meanings, too.
Yeah, the only problem is they are interspersed with gigantic dialogue potholes. I
was going to say manure to go with the M's.
Yeah, okay, well, that's probably more befitting the mode of transport.
Truly.
It's like, hey, dude, don't, I don't know how close he was planning on sleeping to Sam.
Right.
The campfire scene. But, baby, don't sleep too close. Something will be warming you other than your blanket.
That is indeed the definition of a rude awakening.
Yeah, so the less said about that, the better. Needless to say, it's... I hate to use the word schizophrenic because that is a real problem that real people deal with. But it's a perhaps badly used piece of shorthand that I feel describes this script pretty well. where it's good, it's very, very good. What did you find here that was good?
I really liked that Monacita had agency of sorts. She was allowed to voice her opinion. She was given dignity, for the most part, even though she was introduced as a slave. So I thought that was really interesting. I thought the things that Pitcairn had to say, like, basically like, hey, we don't own people. She has as much right to be here as anybody else. And his consistent refusal to sell her or hand her over to anyone else, I thought was really good. And so him affirming her dignity as another human being, I thought was really good. I really enjoyed that.
The anti-slavery angle that's present in this, you think about the time frame this show happens in, it's like we literally just had a war about this.
Right.
But do go on. That was just a brainstorm that occurred as you were saying that, and it's just like we literally just had a war about this.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. And then thinking about those kinds of messages of him constantly like affirming her dignity, both as someone who isn't white and someone who isn't a man, I thought that was really good and really poignant, especially considering this was released in 1960.
Yeah.
Pre-civil rights movement. Well, not like pre-civil rights movement, but
mid-civil rights movement, yeah.
Mid-civil rights movement. And so I thought that was really powerful. But then you've got the manure, if you will, of just like a woman. And then, of course, you are affirming her dignity as someone who isn't white, and yet she is played by someone who is white.
Yeah, that's something that I have in my notes here too. The lack of authentic casting. It wasn't a feature on the landscape then. It is very problematic now.
Yeah.
And yet, here's the thing. These notions of no human being is someone else's property, advocating for equality and for dignity for genders and ethnicities other than Pitcairn's own, that's fantastic. And you are absolutely correct. Any progress on espousing a view in favor of civil rights for anyone other than the Caucasian male in 1960, any movement of that needle is an important move. So I'm trying to balance this from my very 21st century media literacy standpoint with what was the landscape like then. I want to give Affair of the Trading Post credit for boldly going there and putting pro-civil rights, anti-slavery, and as much pro-feminist dialogue as it could get away with into the mouth of the show's lead. However, because he's the one saying a lot of it, you also have this kind of white savior thing going on that I'm a bit uncomfortable with. Again, this is something we probably only spot now. Back then, it was like, oh, well, that's all right then.
Yeah.
But here, it just seems like it's such a big white savior narrative, you could spot it from orbit. I'm torn. I mean, we can see the flaws in the execution in hindsight, but I also feel like we need to give it credit for the gains that it did make at a time when it was hard to get those gains on the air.
Yeah, I think the fact that he was able to do that so explicitly is very progressive for the time. Even with its flaws in what we could look at it now, for the time, I doubt there was much of anything else doing the same thing, with the exception of maybe Have Gun Will Travel. And even then, like, a lot of that might be just down to the only episodes of Have Gun Will Travel I've seen are the ones that Gene wrote. So there's that.
It seems like George Slavin must have understood the assignment, and I feel like the evidence of that is that we see him again in the credits of Star Trek at the end of this decade.
Right.
And maybe it's just a co-write credit, but still, I don't think Gene would have invited him to the next party if he hadn't gotten it right here.
For sure.
So for all of the problems that this script has, and for example, next time Pitcairn is kind of semi-perving on a woman doing anything related to bathing, and going, I do declare, I kind of want Sam to go step on his foot and snort in his ear.
Yeah. It's like, Sam, can you just whap him?
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of, there was a commercial, I think it was a Super Bowl commercial several years ago, and it's turned into a meme now, and probably describing that will get it across, but it's like, a woman walks by and this guy is like, hey, and his buddy just kind of firmly plants a hand on his chest to stop him, like, no, don't be that guy. Pitcairn still needs that buddy. And he doesn't have what he just got, Sam, so you step up, Sam.
Mm-hmm.
It's a bit of a curate's egg. I feel like we're seeing a lot of movement in the right direction. What is baffling is the backward steps that we get in the middle of it.
Yeah. Yeah. For the steps forward we're taking, I definitely want to applaud it. And this is going to be a scenario I think we're going to face in a lot of the scripts that we cover, Earl, We're going to rejoice in the battles that we do win, and then getting better, hoping for more.
Special thanks to the Roddenberry Repertory Players. Our cast this week featured Cody Banning as Pitcairn and Alyx Banning as Monacita. Gene-ology is meant to be entertaining and informative, but it's also just the beginning of an ongoing conversation about the works of Gene Roddenberry. Drop us a line at missionlog@roddenberry.com and join us on Facebook at MissionLogPod. And please remember, your comments could be used on future installments of Gene-ology. By the way, reviews help our shows more than you know. If you don't have it in you to write a blurb about how much you like the show, just dropping 5 stars on us really goes a long way to telling the algorithm that you enjoy the show and you think others might dig it too. If you have any material that might be of interest to us that isn't already in the Roddenberry archive, drop us a line at missionlog@roddenberry.com. Our website is missionlogpodcast.com. And Mission Log Gene-ology is produced by Roddenberry Entertainment.
On the next Gene-ology, The Affair with Browning's Woman. Special thanks to consulting producers Matt Esposito, Homer Frizzell, Rand Hurl, Tom Kozak, Julie Miller, Mike Richards, Mike Schabel, Paul Shadwell, and David Takechi.
Back next week with more of your favorite programs. This concludes our broadcast day.
This is a Roddenberry podcast. For more great podcasts, visit podcast.roddenberry.com.